All right, well, we're going to go ahead and jump into our webinar a little bit here. Good morning, everybody. I just want to welcome you to our webinar involving OCCRRA. We are working through understanding the child care grant guidelines from the new CARES Act grant that was received to child care providers. Today on the call, we have a few familiar faces and probably some that you might not recognize. So I just want to go over the agenda real quick with you. We're going to do our welcome and introductions, and then we're going to turn it over to OCCCRRA with Todd Barnhouse and Judah Santmeyer. They're going to present some more information on that Pandemic Support Payments Grant, and then we'll have questions and answers at the end. So before we jump right into it, we're going to launch a poll, and if you could just answer the questions that pop up on your screen, and then we'll be sure to share those results with you in a few minutes. So we're going to go ahead and launch that poll so you have it. Yeah, a lot of people on the call today. So this is lots of interesting information that we're gathering right now. So there's some questions, I think, in the chat around the poll. There should be 4 questions total. See if I can make it bigger, if that helps at all.
There were some questions about submitting, and it sounds like you had to answer that last question, whether you're open in order for it to submit your answers for the poll, if you're having difficulty with submitting your poll.
All right, so what happens with the polls is usually it times out for those results, but we do have a good chunk of people from the call have responded. So are we able to share those results on the screen? So it looks like we have a lot of center-based programs on the call today, and a few family child care programs, most of which are open and have been since before June 15. And then from as far as the surrounding areas, we have a good split, it looks like, from the Dayton, Cincinnati, and then other areas as well. So thank you all if you were able to participate in the poll. And let's continue with our agenda today. So I just want to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Caitlin Hackett, and I'm one of the team leads here in 4C for Children. Also on our panel, we have Angie Lance, who's another team lead, Lisa Babb, who's a strategic director, Emily Meyer, who's a strategic director. Those three will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A as you're posting those questions. And then from OCCRRA, we also have Judith Santmeyer and Todd Barnhouse, who will be walking us through the PowerPoint today on the CARES Act grant, as well as answering some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Todd and Judith to get us started. And please, again, if you have questions, post them on the Q&A, and we'll be sure to monitor them.
One second. It's all right, Caitlin, that's not going to work because it wants me to quit my Zoom in order to do that. If you wouldn't mind forwarding the slides, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all.
Great. So next slide, please. So thank you everyone for having me and Judith and I on this call this morning, actually. It's an interesting time for all of us, and we certainly appreciate all your willingness to come together and help us learn and grow and shape, and as we move through this time, as well as in the opportunity for us to move out resources. So if you could, the next slide, please. All right, it's not moving. So the next thing I want to share on the second slide is that the pandemic grant support grants are a result of the state's investment of the CARES Act funding. Many of you that have been in most of our large organizations, associations, and partners have been doing town halls and webinars throughout this time frame. So you're probably fully aware of the fact that there was a federal stimulus package that came, and Ohio is using 117 of their investment or CARES stimulus package to put into childcare, and 60 of that $117 million is being used for these pandemic support payment grants. ODJFS, Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, is our funder for these grants as these funds comes through the Child Care Development Block Grant to JFS. OCCRRA is the administrating organization for these grants, and so this is an opportunity for us to kind of share what the grant program is. And Caitlin, I don't know if you can move the slide to maybe slide 3. Because right now we're still on 1.
You see background?
I'm sorry. I can currently on my screen, I see the first slide.
Okay. Let's try it again.
I think you need to hit the enable editing button at the top, Caitlin, so that it'll launch. I think.
There we go. Awesome. So you're on slide 3 now?
Sorry about that.
You're all right. This is awesome. This is a wonderful virtual world that we live in.
Can you see grants?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. So we're on slide 3. And so for the grants and the pandemic support grants are currently, it's a monthly payment as long as the reopening criteria are met for the grants. The $60 million right now has been allocated across June and July. if there are funds that are remaining from, as these are federal dollars, they can move from, interesting thing about where we are timing wise, we're coming to the end of the fiscal year, state fiscal year, which is June 30th. So there are funds set aside for June, and then there will be funds set aside for July. And the current funding is $30 million in June that needs to get up. You have the opportunity to apply for, and we want to get the money out the door. And then there's an opportunity for funds in July. Depending upon how many programs, and the last time I heard there were 3,500 plus programs that have said they were reopening. I'm sensing those are center-based. I don't have the home-based numbers as yet, but it's still a portion of what we would originally expect because programs are opening at different times throughout June, July, and potentially August, September. And then some programs have decided not to reopen, which is terribly unfortunate that based upon just the circumstances that have occurred. So there's a June application, there'll be a July application, and currently those applications, they are open for only the type A, type B day camps and in-home aids. They open June 1st. On June 14th, the center's application will open. Those applications are currently housed in the organizational dashboard of your Ohio Professional Registry. So if you're the administrator, owner, you will have access to those applications in your organizational dashboard. Can I have your next slide, please? So there currently are really two grant types or components of this grant. There's a base payment, a maximum licensing capacity, and so in the guidance documents, the frequently asked questions, we updated those as of this morning. Folks have been really helpful in feeding questions into our email box for this grant, and we've been able to refine and get clarification on certain items. So we've updated that frequently asked questions as well as the guidance for both centers and type A, type B day camps and in-home aids as of this morning. But there's a COVID-19 grant, which is really the base payment, and it's referenced in some of the earlier documents. And there is a ratio support grant that if you are center, and right now that is only eligible, centers are the only ones eligible for that base plus the ratio support. And then each of those items, and we'll get to the grids here in a moment, but you'll see that there are different funding criteria or amounts that are allocated based upon whether or not you're rated. You do not necessarily need to be rated to apply for this grant. And there's also, when we get to the ratio support, you also can enter your private pay children. So if you're not necessarily heavily publicly funded, there is an opportunity for you to add those numbers for children that have enrolled. Could I have the next slide, please? This is probably a better slide to look at. So base payment or COVID-19 payment will be for day camps and in-home aids. There's a base payment plus a step up to quality rating amount for type A's and type B's. That's for both rated and non-rated. Then for centers only, there's a base payment, a step up to quality rating amount, and a ratio support amount based upon the number of children that you've enrolled and served within a 2-week time frame within June in order to claim that part for a June payment. Guidance has been revised, and Judith is going to get into more of the particulars, but if you are a center program that is opening in June but later than the cutoff dates for the application, you still will be able to apply for a COVID-19 or base payment, and then you would submit enrollment numbers with your application in July. Could I have the next slide, please? So we're currently asking for folks to apply, and like I said, that application is available currently for type A's, type B's, day camps and in-home aids on OCCRRA.org in your in the professional registry in the organizational dashboard. That certainly was quite a long thing, but there's plenty of guidance to help get you to where you need to for that application. then June 14th, the applications will open up for centers. A W-9 is required because we in order for us as OCCRRA to make sure that we have a accounting relationship with you, we are asking all programs that apply to upload a W-9. Can I have the next slide, please? And so here's some dates for you. And the guidance document is actually a little clearer and the frequently asked questions. But the June payments will cover May 14th through June 30th. This is the COVID-19 payment, which is also considered a base payment. And then July, it will be July 1 through June 30. Now, interestingly enough, I know that there are some programs that have been, well, one have been serving as pandemic childcare programs, which we certainly are appreciative and grateful for. Thank you. So you may have been purchasing things prior to May 14th. May 14th is the date that is the date that the governor announced the reopening of childcare. So that is where expenses now from May 14th through June 30 are applicable. And then in July, there's the July payments covers July 1 through June 30. Ratio support payment is based upon enrollment. So for centers only. And you have to be, for June, you have to be reopened and serve children for at least 2 weeks prior to June 21st. And for July payment, you need to be reopened and serve children for at least 2 weeks prior to July 18th. This other expenses, and these are allowable expenses that we're talking about right now. If you visit to OCCRRA.org and look at the FAQs today, right now, you'll find that the list of allowable expenses has expanded based upon feedback that we have received from all of you. Could I have the next slide? And let's see. Actually, I think I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Judith, as I believe I've already talked over one of her slides. So Judith, would you like to take over?
Absolutely. So this slide talks about the reconciliation that is required. And so there is a reconciliation due for each month of grants that's received. So one for June, one for July. The reconciliation is site specific. So this is really in reference to those programs that have multiple sites. Much like the grant amount is determined site specific, so is the reporting requirement here. The June reconciliation is due July 31st. And we do know, because we are working on that design right now, that you're not able to see the reconciliation form as of yet, but you will be able to, and it'll appear on your organization dashboard for access. We will also require documentation to be uploaded to support the amounts claimed. And the next slide talks about what documentation looks like and what that means. So our expense documentation are from third-party vendors for goods or services that show order and payment information. So this would include, but not be limited to, receipts, purchase orders with payment information, paid invoices, and for the enrollment support payment, since personnel is a part of that component, payroll journals would be acceptable for that. Depending on how your program works with payroll, if it's a third-party vendor or you do it internally, the physical report itself might look different. But we want to understand kind of who is being paid and how much is being allocated towards these funds. When we do get to the reconciliation portion, you'll be provided categories, much like the categories provided in the grant. So things like PPE, classroom dividers will be those types of headings. And so we'll ask you to provide us a total of how much you've spent that month on that expense category. So we do ask that the documentation that you provide to us is clearly labeled, just so that we can follow that more easily. For multi-sites, it's possible that the receipt that you have is for multiple sites. So if you're buying something in bulk, and let's just throw out an example of masks, you might be buying one purchase, but it's for all the sites. And so that would be, we would just ask for that to be labeled as well so that we understand how you're allocating those expenses. Our next slide talks about, and Todd has shared this as well, the posted resources that are at OCCRRA.org. So we do have direct links to the manual procedure letters, both for centers and then the type A's, type B letter as well. We have our frequently asked questions and guidance documents that have just been revised this morning. We have an application user guide that provides that step-by-step process with screenshots of how to complete the application. And then we will have a similar document for the reconciliation so that you have that step-by-step and the screenshots to know how to complete that process. Our questions, we have a email box, pandemic support grant at OCCCRRA.org to help support you through this grant process. So we have a team of individuals who respond to those so that we can get you the information that you need quickly. So I think at this point, if we want to refer to the questions that may have been collecting, we're happy to answer those.
Yep, so I'm going to turn it over to some of our panelists with Angie and Lisa. I know they've been working through some of the questions here. So Angie or Lisa, can you share with us some of the big questions that have popped up, please?
Sure. Some of the questions are around, can the money be used for repairs? So like air conditioners or any kind of repairs that would be needed to a center.
Currently, that is not an allowable cost. Those would be considered construction costs. And Judith, I don't know if you want me speaking. You're probably more an expert at this than I am.
Please, I would say the same thing.
Okay, thank you. There was a question that came up about whether they can allocate part of the corporate overhead to the salary costs with the additional help that's going to be needed.
So I'll take a stab at this, and then Judith, maybe I should mute myself. The interesting thing about this, and if folks who are familiar with QAA and how we worked Quality Achievement Awards in past years, we've had this question in the past about certain costs. So it's the whole thing of like rent, utilities, construction, some things that don't fit well in a allowable cost portion. So the thought is to focus on the big ticket items, and certainly this is more centers around staffing and personnel and those costs, and moving those into what you're providing reconciliation towards the when you reconcile, so that you show how you allocated those expenses.
I think as well, to piggyback on that, the guidance provided by JFS refers to personnel working in reopened classrooms. So when you're looking at a general admin allocation, I think that would be potentially outside of some of that, unless it's depending on how you're structuring overhead. If all of your admin is in overhead, I mean, definitely what is needed for the reopened classrooms as far as function could apply.
Thank you, Ange.
Sure. There was a question about, is this money, is it considered income and therefore needs to be, can't think of the word.
Count it, yes. So
Yeah.
we would certainly, and I know for our family child care providers, this comes into play, and a lot of times is certainly to contact and get counsel from your tax representative on that and how that works. Certainly we're not here. We unfortunately can't provide the tax advice, but certainly I'd suggest getting in contact with someone that's an expert in that area.
Okay, thank you. There was quite a few questions around how the
Ratio.
how it was determined with the ratio with enrollment versus capacity, and how that was determined with the ratios being what they are right now.
Yeah, so I'll explain to you a little bit how the application is actually working and the formula is working in the background. So the licensing capacity for your program, type A, type B, day camp, in-home aid, and centers, is based upon your pre-COVID, your current approved capacity. So when you're working through the application for ratio support, and this once again is centers only, you are counting the children that are currently attending your program in that window. This is not who used to attend prior to March 24th or when we shut down. It's the children that are actually attending. So I think that what we need to keep in mind with this, and where it makes it complicated, but we have to understand, if you were publicly funded during the closure, the state continued to make closure payments, and that cost the state about $14.5 million a week. So therefore, when we're reopening, they wanted an opportunity, and not many states do, where they also allow you to claim private pay in these numbers, but they wanted to kind of balance that out. So this is why in that ratio, you have the opportunity for children that are also private pay to include them in your account, your account for enrollment. Now they have to be attending at least one day during that window in order to be your reopen window in order to apply for that part. Judith, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I think that's great.
There were also some questions around having cleaning done. So would it cover, let's say you brought in a third party to clean the center before you reopened, or for weekly cleaning? Is that an allowable expense?
Yes, on the frequently asked questions that are posted on OCCRRA.org, professional services and cleaning services and those types of items are now listed in allowable costs to expand the other.
Okay, thank you.
As are classroom materials and some other items where we're getting a lot of questions about, is it okay? Now, the one thing that is interesting too is the window of coverage of, we're not, unfortunately this grant, because of the funding that is available, and we would like it to last and roll. I'd love to be able to make an August payment as well. That's why the state's being a little more conservative about not going back before May 14th. I know some items were kind of longer lead items if you were planning to reopen, because the state had, we were all wondering when we were going to reopen. But right now for this grant, the items have to have been ordered after May 14th and then received and paid for. I think that wraps
So even if
some of the other.
So that was one of the questions.
I'm sorry?
That was one of the questions. They were received, I think, May 18th, because they were concerned that they were going to run out of supplies with the sinks and things. So they were ordered before May 14th, received after May 14th. That would still not count for this. Is that correct?
And I'll defer that to Judith, because it's whether or not, since they're paying for, if they paid for it prior, or if they're paying for it once it's received. And Judith, you probably have a better explanation than I do.
Yes, it would depend on what their documentation for the expense was. So if it wasn't, and it's tough to say, but if it was paid upon delivery, or if it was, when it was charged, if you will, would be what we would expect in that window. So if it had to be, in this particular instance, if it had to be paid upon order, which would be before May 14th, it would not be able to be included.
Okay. There were a couple of questions just in talking about communication. Yes, we will be sending these slides. If you are not covered under the 4C resource and referral agency, we're going to be sending these out to all of the resource and referral agencies, and we're collecting the questions that were asked in the Q&A, and we're going to be asking Todd and Judith to respond to those. So there'll be a little bit of a delay in order to get those answered. So we will also be putting those on our website and sending those to our partner agencies. There is a
Actually,
question
Lisa,
where...
Hey, Lisa, real quick. I'm going to ask, because we'll post, you'll send us this recording and we'll post the FAQs. It would make sense that way it's available for all, if that's okay
Perfect.
with you.
Absolutely. That was the other question. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Where is the FAQ going to be posted? And is there a live person? We have the email there of where they can go. Is there a live person if they have a question that they'd like to call somebody? Is there any place to go?
Oh yeah, we're managing all the traffic through the pandemic support grant at OCCRRA.org, but our team, our registry team, is responding to those requests as they come in. So you contact our office, we'll respond. There are live.
So what would they call if they wanted to?
No different number
that?
than what they would normally call, which is Judith, what is our number?
877-547-6978.
But Lisa, I would encourage folks, please review the FAQs, because there hasn't been a question that's come across in the chat today that we haven't already answered.
Good to know. And you're continuing to update those FAQs. Like when we send you this, you're going to continue updating those. So it's important that people check back on those FAQs as questions come up, because probably you're going to see it come up there.
Yep.
Great. Okay, Ange.
There were some questions around if you had already received PPP money, or if you've received assistance prior, are you still eligible for this grant now?
Yes, they're not connected together.
Okay.
I would just piggyback on top of that and understand that if those funds are covering certain individuals and their pay, you can't apply that same pay for the same time period to these funds.
Okay.
Can you
go ahead?
Sorry, there were also some questions around if you're, let's say, a part-time preschool or a program that wouldn't be opening until the fall. Do we anticipate there would be any funds in the fall for those programs that are not year-round?
That's unknown right now.
Okay.
I mean, unfortunately, I'd love to be able to say there's funds going to be available. I know we've been, a lot of us have been, and all of you have been advocating for additional stimulus dollars to come to the state, which potentially could open that up to grants for the programs opening in the fall. But currently right now, it's estimated that the money, if all programs that, well, not all programs, I think we estimate about 80% programs coming back, the 60 million would be spent by the end of June.
Can you explain what the difference is between a registered day camp and an approved day camp?
Yeah, a registered day camp or approved day camp serves publicly funded children.
Okay. Do you have another, Ange? We're going through these questions as fast as we can, everybody, trying to clump them together.
I honestly think those are the, like from seeing, those are primarily the questions, the large buckets of questions that people had.
So I've been looking at some of the chat too. Is it okay if I answer some ones that I think maybe we can help with?
Yes,
so
please.
One question is, does the expense amount have to equal the allotted amount? And the answer is you're going to be allotted based upon the formula. So a base payment and then a ratio payment if you're a center. So you'll be allotted a grant amount. So your invoices will have to support either through payroll ledgers or documentation or expense documentation that you've spent at least that amount. If not, you will have to return those dollars, the remaining dollars, back to OCCRRA, and we'll have to return them back to Jobs and Family Services. So that's one I saw in there.
And I did see a couple with, is this just for publicly funded children or is it for public and private?
Both. It is for both publicly funded and private pay.
How will it be handled if a provider goes from a type B to a type A during this process that there is funding available? Will anything change with that?
It's one of those things that I think we would deal with on a case-by-case basis. Shockingly, I don't, well, not shockingly. I'm not the best person. I don't use the best words at times. We know certain processes take a little longer. So to move and even be licensed from an A to a B, or a B to an A, or from an A to a center, that takes a certain amount of time. So it would be whatever that program status is for that program at that time during this window to apply for and what they'd be eligible for. Now, if for some reason, I'm guessing if this could happen, if they were, say they were a B in June and in July they are an A, they, you know, the formula would be different because we get those, when those changes are made from the state, we receive those nightly. So it would be updated in the formula in the July application if for some reason, if that happened.
I think that's what the question is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
There are
and
some
any of the ones that kind of get into that kind of gray, we know that there's going to be some that aren't going to fit as nicely to all the guidance. So we'll certainly work with the programs.
There have been some questions around payroll also, like if an administrator spends some time in the classroom because of the ratio, how are they supposed to handle payroll, and are these funds, can you kind of go over again, are these funds able to use for employees? I think that's a really confusing
Well, the key
issue.
part about all of the payroll part, it's staff in that classroom that can be billed to this grant. So
what if an
administrator comes in and fills in for a portion of that time, as long as they're able to show that portion of that time in that classroom on, I'm not sure, and Judith probably can explain that better than I can about how it's allocated on the payroll ledger, the time, but if you're able to show that, then those would be applicable. Is that correct, Judith?
That's right. So as you're able, as the administrator is in the classroom, be able to determine how much time that is, you can allocate those payroll to these funds. I would also say, is included in the frequently asked questions, cleaning crews, you know, staff members who are cleaning in the classroom could also be used as allowable, and that would include during the day and after, if there's like an after hours, they're still working in that classroom for cleaning.
Try to see if there's any.
What is the timing? I've seen some questions around the timing of when they will receive payments.
Well, as you can imagine, as long as the information is good to go, accurate, and ready to move, our goal is to move it out quickly. I think that, Judith, we had said, what, June 20, what is the date that we would make sure that payments are made by or begin? I just can't remember that date.
Yes, so payments for family child care can begin June 18th, and then we would be looking for center payments to begin June 22nd.
And is that a paper check or a direct deposit?
It's a paper check.
Can you cover a little bit about the allowable toys if they're purchasing extra things or extra shelving because of having smaller ratios and having to divide up rooms? How do you make that determination of what is allowable?
I'll defer to Judith. We've tried to
Sure.
be as open as possible. My thing is, and with most things, if it's a question most times after all the guidance has been provided, then most likely it's not applicable or allowable. But certainly we've been responding to those questions that hit that email.
Yes, and your best reference point is the frequently asked questions in the other expense category. And we've provided indoor, outdoor classroom materials as a component for that. And specifically because you're essentially establishing more classrooms with smaller groups.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to utilize those materials that you already have, and then there may be additional ones that are needed to accomplish that goal. And then the fact that there could be the storage items related to that as well. So if there's individual art caddies or the individual sensory bins to avoid cross-contamination, that too would be allowable.
I see some questions around the enrollment numbers, and the whole purpose of this and the payment for this is for children that are actually attending those programs during those window or during those time frames. So if it's before then or after then, so if many children are not coming back maybe until the fall, you would not count those in your enrollment numbers for June or July. Because when you have to reconcile, you'll have to show that they actually attended the program during that time.
And this piece actually helps programs a little bit, because what we are finding and what programs have shared with us is that once they receive and confirm with families that they might be returning, for one reason or another, they may not actually return at the date they say they will. So providing that enrollment data at the time that you're completing the application for your opening time, it helps with that as well.
Does that money need to be spent during a certain time frame? Like, will the receipts have to be between this date and this date?
So for the expense window, for the June expenses, that's May 14th to June 30th. And for July, it's July 1 to July 30th.
Okay, thank you.
31st, my apologies. There's 31 days in July.
Could it cover a service if they needed a plumber to help with the sink?
I don't know that answer. I think the answer is no, because it's kind of like a construction type item. But we certainly could take it back and look into it, but I'm sensing it's more of a construction item. And I know that with most of the, like the temporary sinks and the different allowances that, or options that the state has provided, it's something that doesn't necessarily take a professional service to, or construction type service to install.
Okay.
There's a question about PPP, and unfortunately that ain't anything that I'm good at. But I know that some of the OCCRRA, I know Preschool's Promise, Ready, Set, Soar, a lot of folks, there's been past webinars that have talked about the loans, the PPP loans. There's a question about what if all the June money is not utilized? That money then will be rolled into the next fiscal year, which begins July 1st. And that's the whole thing of, when we did some original estimates, I thought we were going to be closer to around $20 million for June. The state wanted to make sure that we had enough funding for June, so they made that 30. So if we come in at a number under $30 million, those dollars will roll to the new fiscal year and be available for the June or July, and then potentially, hopefully, would roll even to an August if there's funds available.
If you have admin doing temp checks in the morning, is that an allowable expense?
Judith?
I think that particular one, we do have other expenses related to daily symptom assessments.
Yes.
So that would be where I would include it.
There's been some questions around food that someone's understanding was it could not count for food, but if they're doing some things that it's individualized portions, is there any flexibility with that?
Not for the food purchases. Okay. Now there may be, as we've included, for the individualized around disposable plates, cups, silverware that would be used at meal times. for that individualized piece, because folks who may traditionally have used family style dining as a mechanism, those would be allowable.
Okay. Can you give guidance on where the FAQ is at? Some people are looking on your site and are not seeing it. So can you give guidance as to where it's at on your site?
Sure.
Sure, if you go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jude. Go ahead, Jude.
If you go to OCCRRA.org, what's considered our landing page, the title at the top is Coronavirus COVID-19 Transitional Pandemic Childcare Information. That center column says 4 programs. And the second heading says Pandemic Support Payment Grant Guidance. And that's where the frequently asked questions, and then the center guidance, and then type A, type B, day camp, in-home aid guidance is right underneath that. They're links.
Great. With the approval process, how long before they know that they're approved for this?
We've actually, our team has been working on them. So the ones that have been the type A's, B's, day camps, and in-home aids, they've already started approving applications.
So it will happen quickly.
It is. I mean, because as you all know, interesting enough for all of us, that we have to close out the state fiscal year by June 30th. So that's why June is a little touchier on the dates, because of just the time crunch that we're in to get the dollars to move out.
And there, I've seen a few about staff bonuses. Can you address anything with that?
I mean, they're going to have to show how they're going to be to put, I'd say no, they're going to have to be able to show how those staff are working in those classrooms. Is
If
that
it's
correct?
staff that are in those classrooms, are staff bonuses allowed for those?
Well, it's going to show up in their payroll ledger. So I don't think bonuses pay out that same way.
Okay.
Is that correct, Judith?
Yes, that's possible depending on how on their payment method.
There's a question around how will you know if an expense is denied? So will you be notified, or will you just receive a different payment than what you submitted?
Oh, no, we'll communicate. If there's any
Okay.
question about it, so they're in the process, we had like 2 days to get the application up and running based upon the guidance we received from the state. We're currently working on the reconciliation component, and that's why that will come here soon. But yeah, there's an exchange. So if there's any question, we'll make contact with the program before we automatically return it or not approve it.
The second part of that question, though, you're likely to get the payment before the reconciliation is complete.
Yeah, so that would be where the payment would come based upon your application and the calculations. If you're a center with the base plus the ratio, that's the reconciliation that you'll have to be able to show that you had payroll or items that meet or exceed that amount. If that amount is not spent, then you do have to return it.
We would ask, yes, we would ask for if there are other expenses for that time period that would be allowable, that could be substituted as well.
So for children who begin on June 15th, can they be counted for the application for June? And also for parents that are holding spots and paying a percentage of tuition, can those children be counted?
No.
No to both of those?
Yes, they can get the COVID-19 base payment, but the enrollment payment, the children have to actually attend. So that would be when those children attend, they potentially could be eligible then in July. But yeah, holding slots is not a child attending.
Question, will they be able to use bank statements as proof of purchase, or do they need the actual receipt?
The actual receipt, because many bank statements only have amounts paid, we wouldn't be able to see the level of detail what was paid for.
Right. There's quite a few questions around storage units and shelving, and because of the additional things they're purchasing. Maybe I even asked you this earlier, I just don't remember because we're going through so many. Are storage units or shelving things allowable in purchasing things because of this?
So I think we were talking about, we have a designation of allowable for the classroom materials. And so there could be storage items related to the examples that we've heard as, art caddies and, individual sensory bins, those types of things that are needed to avoid cross-contamination.
Okay, thank you. Angie, is there anything else you see, or Todd or Judith, that you see that we're missing? And I know there are some other unanswered. We're trying to bucket together the main things, but we will be sending these on and making sure that they're covered in the FAQs that are on OCCRRA's website.
Yeah, and we do appreciate everyone's questions, and it is influencing how we manage this grant. And certainly I know it's frustrating because there's so much anxiousness just about reopening. I certainly want to say thank you to all the programs that have reopened, and certainly those programs that provided pandemic care for the children. Because I mean, this is one of those things where, as you all know, we've worked so hard to have a strong early childhood system, and this kind of bump, in the road, if you will, we want to get over it and come back even stronger. So the fact that the state is willing to move these dollars out sooner rather than later is their commitment to trying to, as best as we can with the funds available, allow programs to reopen.
Thank you so much. You guys have been a huge help. I do have one more quick question that I saw come up. Does the student have to be full-time in order for them to count them for reimbursement?
No, they just have to attend during that time frame.
Just during that time frame. Okay. Okay, Caitlin, we are just about at our time frame, and I want to honor everybody's time here. Caitlin, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for all of the questions that you've posted, for taking time out of your busy day, and for continuing to care for the little ones in our community and the families that desperately need our support. I want to thank both Todd and Judith today for taking time out of their day to answer all of our questions and share a little bit more information about where this grant money is coming from and how we can spend it. Just as a reminder, please make sure that you're logging into your OCCRRA account and getting your reopening statements done before June 7th, which is this weekend. And then, as you can see on the screen, any questions pertaining specifically to this grant, you'll just send them on to the Pandemic Support Grant at OCCRRA.org, or you're welcome to call them. And I think Judith shared the number 877-547-6978. I think best practice though would be email, because then you have it in writing too. So again, these both of the questions and the recordings will be shared on our websites and OCCRRA's website. So thank you all again for taking some time out of your day, and we appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.